Hello everyone, I'm Bradley Simpson, artist, writer, and children's book illustrator. If you're new to my channel, I've been working as a freelancer and self-published author and illustrator for close to 15 years now. I've freelanced several books and covers over the years, but it's been a while since I've done a video for beginner illustrators. I remember when I was first starting out, I had so many questions and there really wasn't a good resource for beginners anywhere, so I really had to learn through trial and error. So that's the purpose of this video, just to start from the beginning and go through the illustrating process step by step. And I think this is good advice whether you're freelancing a project for someone else or self-publishing your own book and you're wondering how to begin the illustration process. There are a lot of things to keep in mind and to be aware of before you even begin sketching your first illustration. So let's just get into it. And while I talk and go over these points, I thought I would just share with you my illustration with you as I work. I'm beginning my own self-published children's book, a collection of fantasy fairy tales, and this is the very first illustration in the book. So, number one, the very first step will sound like common sense, but like Mark Twain said, common sense isn't all that common. You want to pick a project that excites you, something you're eager to do. If you really like illustrating ghost stories, then that should be your focus. If you like science fiction, then create a science fiction project. The idea is by picking something you're truly excited about, you will make it a true labor of love and put a lot of hard work into it. And when you pay attention to the details, that's when people really take notice, and that sets you apart from everyone else. Steve Martin, the actor-comedian, once said, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And that really should be your motto. Step number two. Decide your book size. Children's books come in all shapes and sizes, so just brainstorm about what size would be best for your specific book. If you're planning on publishing on an online platform such as Amazon, you'll be doing yourself a big favor by familiarizing yourself with their accepted dimensions. They do accept a lot of sizes. Some children's books are more vertical, others horizontal, some are a complete square. And if you're illustrating a juvenile book, such as the Harry Potter series, those are much smaller than what an average picture book would be. And if you're printing on demand through Amazon's KDP program, then there's really a lot of sizes to choose from. The same goes with many of the other print-on-demand services you can hire. One size doesn't fit all, so just do your research before you even begin planning your book's layout. For this book I'm working on now, I'm using 9x12 acrylic paper. And for this first illustration, I'm doing a partial double spread. I'll talk more about that when I talk about your book's layout, which leads me to step number three. Plan your book's layout. This is a step in the process in which you'll create a very rough dummy book. Plan out the number of pages you need to use. Your book will need to be an even number of pages, including the front and back covers. In other words, the front cover is considered to be page number 1, and the back cover is your last page. A standard picture book is 32 pages, including the covers. If you're planning on doing a longer chapter book, make sure it also ends in an even number. Now, very important to keep in mind, if you plan on publishing your book as a hardcover, you can do this with Amazon's print on demand, but your book has to be at least 75 pages in length. Anything under 75 pages will automatically print as a paperback. Naturally, the number of pages in your book will depend on the size trim you decide on and the amount of story text you want per page. This is also the step where you decide what illustration goes with each bit of text. You will also want to decide how to display your illustrations. Your text can go below the illustrations, or above, or to the side. You might choose to have a blank page dedicated solely for text, while the opposite page is solely for your illustrations. Or you can accommodate all of these styles within the same book, which is usually what I do. If you're doing a chapter book, especially young adult fiction or fantasy, you may choose to only have an illustration once or twice per chapter. It's common for these illustrations to be done in ink or pencil. Also in this step, you need to decide if your illustrations are going to be full bleed or bordered. By full bleed, I mean, the color of your illustrations consume the entire page, going all the way to the edges. Here are examples of illustrations I've done that are full bleed. Note how the color goes all the way to the edge of the canvas paper. Your other option is to have borders. Here are some examples of illustrations that have a neat border. But note, not all illustrations need to have a perfect border. They can be very loose and airy. The illustration I'm working on now has a very loose border. For your book, you may want to include double spreads. Here are some examples I've done of double spreads. This means illustrations take up 2 full pages, while the story text is written before and after these pages. That's a lot to remember, I know, but don't worry, I'm making a list of all these steps in the description below for your convenience, so you can just copy and paste into your own notes and create a checklist. Step number 4 is where the fun begins. You get to start illustrating. In this step, it's important to decide what medium you're going to use for your illustrations. If you're illustrating digitally, then it doesn't make a difference. If you're painting with watercolors, you'll need to buy a canvas paper that's created specifically for watercolor paints. Likewise with acrylics and oils. If you're going to work with colored pencils, Inktense pencils, pastels, markers, or watercolor pencils, I would recommend purchasing a good quality mixed media paper. Once you've chosen your medium, it's time to design your illustration. I personally use a pencil to sketch a rough idea of my layout. In doing a rough sketch, I don't commit to the illustration until I get the composition that I like. Once you're happy with your composition, then it's time to start laying the color. Step number 5, creating your book cover. This is a very important step, needless to say. The old adage says you should never judge a book by its cover, but when you're an illustrator, you can throw that right out the window. Everyone judges a book by its cover. You want to make sure yours is nothing short of amazing. Really spend a lot of time on your front cover. Work it, rework it, and work it some more until you've got the perfect composition. Remember what Steve Martin said, be so good they can't ignore you. And don't forget your back cover. Your back cover is a great chance to shine and separate yourself from the multitude of amateur artists out there. Put in the work, illustrate a very catchy back cover. It will be worth it. Step 6, designing your title page, etc. I personally always give my title pages their own illustrations. I never just copy and paste from other pages within my story. That's a shortcut, and I think it's also a shortcoming. Furthermore, I go the extra step and illustrate the inside cover. Many traditional book publishers leave this space completely blank. I think that's a wasted opportunity. Why not showcase your artistic skill and utilize this space? If you're not sure what I'm talking about, find a children's book that's handy, open it, and look at the space right inside the cover. Is it blank white space? If so, chances are the page right next to it is also blank white space. Those are the pages I'm talking about. Color them with majestic illustrations. I usually do double layouts on this space. This is my personal preference for hardback books, not so much with paperback. Paperback covers are obviously more flimsy and therefore don't necessarily accommodate full illustrations well. In the end, it's all about your personal preference and what suits your project best. And that's really it for the illustration part of your self-published children's book. Of course, now is the part where you add story text to your book, but I'm going to save that for my next video. But before I go, I want to talk a little bit about finding inspiration for your art. That's just as important as all the other steps. For me, I always find inspiration anytime I walk outdoors. I love nature and wildlife, and I always make sure I have a good camera with me to take videos and still shots when I'm out. This line of trees here was the inspiration for the illustration I've been working on today. It's been a very dark and cold January with a lot of rainy, snowy, gray days. And I think these cedar trees are quite spooky and dark, and that's just the atmosphere I'm trying to convey in my book, my collection of fairy tales. I can't wait until it's done and I get to share it with audiences all over the world. I'm proud to be a self-published freelancer, and I know that you can be too. It's so easy to be overwhelmed and discouraged. But don't give up. Remember, at the beginning of each day, remind yourself of these words. The world needs what you were made to be.